$0 to $2,500, the financial cost of adopting a child through the foster care system. I'm your host, Marcy Bursack, and I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to find more forever families. After blogging my journey adopting a pair of siblings, I realized I knew countless people who had the desire to adopt, but believed it was too expensive. So I wrote the Forgotten Adoption Option, a self-reflection and how-to guide for pursuing foster care adoption. And I started this podcast. I am very delighted that you're tuning in. In Season 2, I'm dropping monthly episodes to teach you how to adopt U.S. children who are waiting for you in the foster care system. You might also enjoy the personal stories of adoptive parents and adopted children that I featured in Season 1. Now, whether now feels like the right time, the process feels overwhelming, or someone quickly comes to mind to share this with, I am here for you. I am America's foster care adoption mentor, and I am eager to help you fulfill a child's dream of having a forever family. Welcome to the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast. In this episode, I'm interviewing an innovative and committed woman who has devoted her career to finding children in foster care forever families. In fact, she's the adoptive mom of 5 children. She and I met because she left cute green tote bags with information on foster care adoption at Beanbag Books in Columbus, Ohio, where I was visiting for the Forgotten Adoption Options first anniversary book tour. Lynn, welcome.
Hi, Marcy. How are you doing?
I am so excited to do this with you. Lynn, I know
I'm
you're
excited to be here.
Yes. And I know you're often asked, like, how do you know you're ready to adopt? And so listeners, I'm pleased to tell you, Lynn knows the answer to that question, not just because she helps families understand their own story, but she's done it herself. So Lynn, let's dive on in. If listeners pursue foster care adoption, they're likely to go to work with someone. They're likely to have to work with someone from Children's Division along the way. So can you give listeners a sense of what your role is at the Department of Job and Family Services in Delaware, Ohio? Because they might work with someone sort of like you.
Sure. I supervise the program unit, which includes 2 foster adoption assessors, 2 case aides, and 2 child care workers. And when someone calls in or requests information through an email, we send an info packet out. And there's a cover letter for me, and I always provide information relevant to our next upcoming classes and encourage folks to either email me or call me if they have questions about the process, about the kids that we serve, about what reunification looks like, about what permanent custody looks like. And then if they go through pre-service training and they fill out an application for child placement and send that back in to me, then I would assign it to one of my 2 assessors to start the home study process.
Which, this is so great. So for listeners, you're thinking, okay, hold on. So Children's Division, what is this? So Children's Division kind of has 2 sides, right? Like the one side is you're helping kids that may need resources to maybe find a temporary or more permanent family, right? And then you're also finding those families too, right?
Well, our children's services unit includes an intake unit, which would do investigations and assessments of maltreatment, abuse, neglect, dependency, et cetera. An ongoing unit where if a child is removed or maybe a protective services case is opened, a worker and a supervisor try to help fix the concerns that brought the family to our attention in the first place and potentially to court involvement. And in some cases where those things can't be fixed, whether it's parental substance abuse or mental health or a combination of both, or a parent literally drops off the face of the earth and doesn't see the child for a period of time, then that unit would file for permanent custody, and then the case would come to me, and one of my workers would carry a child-only case, a child-specific case, with that child who needs permanency. During the time that the case is in the ongoing unit, and even in the intake unit, I should back up, as they are planning for what's going to happen. Is this going to be a removal? If so, do we have kinship? Do we have a family member? Do we have a school teacher, a neighbor, someone who knows this child who would be willing to take placement of this child so that we don't have to disrupt them from school, from potential counseling, from their community, and then place them in a foster home. So all three of our units work very closely together on a daily basis.
Which is incredible. Now, I know for my own family's adoption story, the Children's Division, once our kids were with us, before we kind of signed the adoption papers, we had a visit from our caseworker and they would just kind of come and ask questions. I think it was like every couple weeks or so. Does that sound about right?
Well, when I took over the unit almost 6 years ago, the expectation was that an assessor would come out and do 4 home visits. That's really kind of unrealistic anymore. We gather enough documentation, references, work-related information. Sometimes a parent, prospective foster or adoptive parent may have been involved in counseling. We get a release and talk to their counselor, see what issues there may be. And we try to limit our home visits to 1 or 2 prior to doing the actual licensing for foster care and or adoption. Once we have a child placed, the state expectation is that we do a face-to-face once a month. That's one of my workers, but then there's also an intake or an ongoing worker meeting with that family as well. For newly licensed families, we tend to have more contact, whether that's by email, by phone, Zoom, FaceTime, could be face-to-face, just to help them along the process with paperwork, mileage reports, what types of things do you need to have the agency sign consent forms for? Do you need to get the child into counseling, or is that the expectation of the caseworker assigned? Those types of things.
Those are great examples, and I think really tactical for our listeners, because you're right. I think after our kids were with us, and you're calling that placement, just for those that aren't familiar with that terminology, we would have an actual like Children's Division worker come to our home. And now that we've signed adoption papers, I think I'm only in contact with our Children's Division person like once a year, and it's mainly just to check on our kids to make sure they know what school they're at. And then my husband and I do like an employment verification. Is that similar to how things are in Ohio with once children are adopted, how often they're in contact?
Once a child is adopted, we are required annually to send out a form to verify that the child and the family are still in need of adoption subsidies, which would include a medical card, perhaps a cash benefit, etc. So that's the only time we would have ongoing contact, unless a family calls us. Some families will will license and maybe take 1 or 2 kids, adopt 1 or 2, and then close out. They're finished. They've achieved their goal. We have a couple of families that have been licensed for years, and I mean years. We have a family that has 3 bio kids. Thus far, they have adopted 7, and they are preparing to adopt the 8th child after that permanent custody trial has given us the permanent custody of that little one.
Wow. Wow. How cool is that? So, okay, we've kind of given our listeners an idea of they will probably talk to someone like a Lynn or Lynn's colleagues or whatever's applicable to their state with Children's Division along the journey. But let's kind of rewind to the very beginning. A family, a new prospective adoptive family, they're like, okay, I want to get started. When they reach out to you or someone like you, Lynn, what are things they ask, whether it's via email or phone? And what are things that you share kind of immediately just so they know what they're getting themselves into?
Good question. Okay, so most often, how do I get started? What do I need to do? Why do I have to do pre-service classes? We have a series of pre-service classes. We do it live twice a year, usually February, March, and September, October. Our trainer has been a foster parent in the past, and she too is an adoptive parent, and she keeps it very, very real. So I tell folks, I know that there are online trainings, but to be honest, you're going to get real life experiences from having Miss Judy as your trainer. She's just a wealth of information. They might ask who facilitates the classes. What happens if I can't make one of the sessions? They will ask, oftentimes, why do I want to go through the process and license with your agency? To which I often reply, you're going to find good and bad with a private agency or with a public agency. I, years ago, licensed through a public initially and then transferred my license to a private agency. We had good workers with both agencies. We had not so good workers with both agencies. That is pretty much, I think, human nature. So I try to get folks to explore, call a few agencies, see who you feel comfortable with. If you want to come in and sit down and do face-to-face with me, that's fine. We can do that. They'll want to know what type of kids we have available. For example, right now we have 4 kids in permanent custody who range in age from 2 to 16. One of those 4 is in an adoptive home. The other 3 are either in treatment foster homes or a residential center to work on some significant behavioral health needs. They want to know about the process. How long does it take? So in Ohio, a child has to be placed in your home for a minimum of 6 months before we can have a petition filed with the probate court to finalize an adoption.
The same in Missouri as well.
Yeah, usually we end up, it can be close to 6 months. Usually it ends up being about the 8 or 9 month mark, which is no big deal. But we still end up with the same result.
What do you tell people? So I'm gonna cut in with a couple of verbs, or I guess vocab words for the listeners. So pre-service training, because that's something I'm not as familiar with in Missouri. Is that like before going through licensing classes, they take a different training?
No, that is the licensing.
That's
so it's a series of classes that will cover things like working with the system. Who are the team members? What's a guardian ad litem? What's a CASA? What is your caseworker? What is the expectation from them? You're part of its team. Your input is valuable. In Delaware County, our judge is very, very, very keen on having foster parents attend court hearings if they are able, and a lot of those are done by Zoom because of COVID. Some of them are done live, depending upon the nature of the case. But he wants input as to how a child is doing in the foster home. Are there any problems? So yeah, they're going to go through those pre-service classes. Once they have completed all of those, that's when they'll contact me and ask me for the application for child placement. They have to fill that out completely. And once they return that to me, then I would assign it to one of the workers to actually begin the home study. I do tell them the state of Ohio wants to know the good, the bad, and the ugly about you. So the questions asked are things like, how do you honor commitment? And when you were growing up, how were you disciplined? Who were you closely related to, as far as like maybe a parent or a sibling? Who do you count on for support? How do you handle work catastrophes? How do you handle crisis when they arise? What are your finances like? Because obviously we want financial stability. Have you lived in the same house for a period of time, or are you bouncing every year, moving from here to here to here? Again, because that goes back to stability for a child. We have a checklist that we created for initial certifications, which details everything that we have to have in order to review and then recommend to the state of Ohio licensing someone as a foster parent. And we go through that with them up front so that they know there are no surprises. We talk about the walkthrough. You have to have a fire inspection with your local fire department. If you have a well, we have to have well water testing. If there's a lake on your property, is it secluded? Is it fenced off? Same with a swimming pool. We try to make it as easy as possible. When you look at the list of what's required paperwork wise, it can be overwhelming. But when you start breaking it down, we need proof of employment through your pay stubs. We need 3 references for foster care and a 4th one if you intend to adopt. And I'll tell you, Marcy, when I took over the unit, it was not in good shape, and we are in very good shape right now. Back in the day, the folks that were in this unit didn't always talk to foster parents, and they are your lifeline. They are the ones doing the heavy work with these kids. They're the ones that are there in the middle of the night when the child is up crying. So I have enforced with my staff, you have conversations with people. You return your phone calls and your emails within 24 hours. If a foster parent is struggling and just needs to go sit down and have a cup of coffee and let it all hang out through tears, then we're going to do that with you because it's not an easy thing to do. It's rewarding, but these kids don't come with instruction manuals. No child does, not even a bio kid. There are behaviors that may arise, things that we may not be aware of at the time of removal. We ask silly questions like, does your child sleep with a nightlight? Does your child have a favorite blanket or a favorite stuffed animal that they need to have to go to sleep at night? Just to make it easier on the family and the child that's being placed.
So interesting. Okay, so let's break this down because we do have some listeners across country, and I know Every state's a little different and the terms are a little different. So from
Sure.
a kind of a big picture view, I think listeners need to hear there are classes you'll have to take to get licensed. Now I know in Missouri, there's a separate set of classes. You start with your foster care license. In Missouri, we call it STARS. And then there's a separate like adoption license that you can get after that, and it's called Spalding. Does Ohio separate those as well?
Yes, there's a foster license and an adoption license, and that's what I started to say before and neglected to finish. When folks contact us, I recommend that we do dual licensing. We
Meaning
can let's
getting
say,
both of them?
yes. So we have one family right now that is foster only, and she has expressed interest to one of my workers that should the children that she has placed in her home be freed for adoption, she would like to adopt them. That's the first time in 5 years that we've ever heard that come from her mouth. We have two families right now that are adopt only. That's fine. As children are brought to our attention, we network with the other 87 counties, and we get flyers all the time. We send them out to our licensed homes and say, hey, this kid is waiting for a home. Are you interested? We've helped facilitate about a year and a half ago placement of a little one from an eastern Ohio county with a family here that we had licensed for foster and adoption, and they ended up successfully adopting him. I believe it was spring or early summer of last year. So yes, I recommend that we do foster and adoption licensing. If you don't want to adopt, that's fine. It's no big deal. It's just, it saves a little bit of time for us doing it up front. That way the timelines sync when your foster license is due to be recerted. So is your adoption.
Right, because there's an annual. So what Lynn's talking about here is there's recertification. So you go through classes, you get a home study, and it sounds like Ohio's a little different. Missouri does the home study while you're taking classes, and that essentially is like they're just trying to understand your entire family story, meaning like
Mhm,
who's living in your home. And it, I think mine ended up having like a 15-page questionnaire, and my husband did too. And then this beautiful document was written, but it was real, and it was the
mhm.
things we had to share, and they were honest. And so that's kind of, is that kind of the gist of the home study, would you say? It's sort of like a way to
Absolutely.
present
Yes,
prospective families to
yes,
the decision making people for kiddos on whether they're going to get placed with you, whether as a foster child or as a potential adoptive child, right?
yes, correct.
Cool. And then how long, because you said a common question is, how long will this take me? How long, if I called you today and I said, Lynn, I want to be an adopt only family. I am not interested in fostering, but I want to adopt a child from foster care. What would you tell me my timeline would be before I could actually like have a child living with me and adopt that child?
I'm going to tell you all, in all honesty, that's going to depend upon you. One,
Oh,
how quickly are you going to get your classes completed? Number two, after you complete those classes, how quickly are you going to request and complete and return to me that application for child placement? Number three, at that point in time, after I've assigned one of the workers, how quickly are you going to complete your home study narrative, the big book like you referenced about relationships, etc.? That's what's going to be entered into the computer, the story of you and your family, and why you want to adopt. And then, as far as having a child placed adoptively, that's going to be another question that is going to be kind of up in the air. There are websites that you can go to, anyone, and any home study can be transferred anywhere in the United States. We've sent home studies to Texas. We've sent them to New York for consideration of placement of kids. We actually placed a couple of kiddos in Florida a few years ago. They were successfully adopted. I think we placed them in July, and they were successfully finalized the following January here in Delaware County. Um, so we don't tend to do a lot of interstate adoptions because most often the families that we've placed with end up adopting kids, permanent custody cases.
oh, that makes sense. But you do, okay. So just to clarify too, so anyone in the U.S. can adopt any, well, people that qualify, right? Like you have to like do the
Yes,
classes and get your license. That's the caveat. But once they're licensed, they can adopt a kid in any state, right? There's not like a rule that I can only adopt kids in my state, although it's more likely, but I can look at kids all across the country, right?
absolutely. Yes.
And to put some websites in case folks listening are like, okay, what websites is Lynn talking about? So you could go right now on adoptuskids.org and you can view some of the profiles of the kids. Now, what you're going to see is like a paragraph. And then as
Mhm.
Lynn mentioned, like once you're licensed, you actually get access to like longer explanations and details on children that are available. So I just wanted to give people that are listening, if they're like, I want to go right now and kind of poke around and see a little bit of resource there. And so what do you do, Lynn? A family comes to you and you kind of give this information and they're like, I just don't know if I'm ready to do this whole process. What do you tell them? How do you guide them to know when they should decide this or not do this?
I think for every individual, that's going to be something they're going to have to determine what's best for them. There are multiple variables. Where are you relationship wise at this point in time? Is this a good time for you or not? Where are you professionally with your career if you work? Where are you financially? And you don't have to make $1 million. We have families who are um, middle class, lower middle class families. All you have to do is meet the criteria. Um,
And what is
and
that
pretty much,
criteria, Lynn? What's the criteria that you have to meet?
well, you have to have clear background checks. There are certain criminal charges that would exclude you, and I'll talk about the biggies: rape, murder, gross sexual imposition, felonious assault. I'm sorry, involuntary manslaughter is one. So those things would preclude you from becoming a licensed parent.
And then like
There
child
are
abuse and neglect would be on that list too, right?
Well, there again, it depends because we
Okay.
have to do a computer check of our network, which Ohio has the SACWIS system, which encompasses cases in all 88 counties. Um, there have been cases where there may have been, it may be that an adoptive dad may have been an alleged child victim back when he was 5 and he's 35 now. We may have to do some digging and contact a county to go back and get records if they are not in SACWIS, but we do background checks to see if folks are an alleged perpetrator or are they an alleged child victim. We have had a family that one of the applicants was a victim of domestic violence early on in her previous relationship. We explored that with her. She signed a consent. We explored that with her therapist. We felt comfortable licensing her. There were some other factors that came up, and she decided not to pursue licensing. That's okay. She might come back at another point in time when things have changed. Um, but so going back to your original question of how are you going to know when it's time, you're going to know. Um, and I guess what I would encourage people to do is really know what you're getting into. Again, bio kids don't come with an instruction manual. These kids don't either. All you need to do is have love, stability, have a big heart, be able to withstand the kids saying, I hate you. Because guess what? Birth kids do that too. I have a child by birth and five by adoption. And, when you're going through teenage years, sometimes it's kind of rough on everybody. Um, but be in there for the long haul. As long as a child is placed in your home, you're going to have the support of an agency. You hopefully will have a child that, if it is warranted, you'll have therapy going on for that child. And I encourage anyone, bio parents, foster parents, adoptive parents, you need to participate in that counseling as recommended by the therapist. It could be you go in the first 15 minutes of the session, talk about how the past week is done, and then the kiddos do their session for the next 45. Or maybe you join at the end, or maybe one time a month you go in for an entire session, and the other 3 sessions are with just the kids. But it's almost like a marriage. When you get together with a partner, you are learning about each other, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Well, these kids have all kinds of things too. I guess one thing I will say is what was profound to me, the first 2 kids that we adopted, spring was just, I'm going to say, hell on earth. They
Mm.
both acted out. They were 11 and 12 at the time of placement. Could not figure out why they were acting out, did not have a clue. So I went back and checked with the worker and all of a sudden realized that every time they were removed, it was typically spring of the year.
Oh,
So the buds are on the trees. Well, it's about time for me to move, isn't it? And that continued even after they were adopted. So trying to reassure them and encourage them that this is your last stop. This is your adoptive family. We're here for good, bad, and ugly. Um, but they didn't have the concept of, oh, yeah, it's springtime and that's when we move. They didn't make the connection. So we helped facilitate that for them. And with therapy, we were able to work through it. It took a while, but that's okay because we figured out what the problem was.
I love that you just shared like a broad range of possible experiences or behaviors. I think you gave a really great snapshot of some of the things people might see or hear and know, like, okay, is now just, and I think it would be the same as having a biological child. Maybe you can speak to this. Like, you thought about, where am I at with my career, and is
Hmm.
this a good time? Like, you think about this, your life, right, and timing of all of this. So Lynn, I wonder if we could talk a little bit more. So you said you have one biological child and then five by adoption. So what's the birth order?
So our biological child was born, and at 6 weeks of age, I knew something was wrong. At 3 months of age, she was diagnosed with a heart condition. So I had always wanted to adopt. Before we got married, my husband decided that, yeah, fostering and adoption sounds like a fun thing to do. So we had wanted to have two and adopt one. We stopped with one and we adopted two. We had our age range on our criteria 0 to 10. And the worker called 1 week in March and she said, "So you've been matched." And I'm like, okay, what's I hear hesitation in your voice. And she said, "Well, she's 11." And I'm like, 11's not that far off of 10. And she
Sure.
said, "Well, her sister turned 12 yesterday." And I went,
Oh,
"Oh, 12. That's preteen. Okay, let me think about this and I'll get back to you." So we ended up taking them. So my bio child went from being the only child to the youngest child. It was
wow.
interesting, but we handled it. Next, we had a 17-month-old little guy placed with us. The day we had him placed, he walked in and started headbanging on plaster walls, and that was kind of a clue as to how things were going to go. Next was a 7.5-year-old little guy that significant mental health in his biological family. And then last but not least was a 6-week-old baby who had been, parental rights had been terminated. And then I got a phone call saying, "Oops, we didn't really terminate dad's rights. Can you keep her for another 30 days?" And it was like, well, yeah, we're not going to have you move her. But during the course of that time, she significantly bonded with us, and we took her to the agency because there was dispute within the agency as to whether she was biracial and was she truly bonded. And we took her to the agency. Someone took her out of my arms and she screamed and held her breath until they brought her back to me. So
Oh,
we got to adopt her. And then we had a couple of other foster kids in between as well. And I always wanted to have 8 kids. I stopped at 6. So, it worked out well.
so you were aiming for a large number. So Lynn, I'm very curious, were you working for the children's division at any point in time while you're adding to your family size?
Absolutely not. I, I worked in the field of education and did not start working in a children's services agency until 1997. And actually, it was a director of a local agency that approached me. We worked together on a committee, and he said, "I want you to pick your job, intake worker, ongoing, or I think he said foster care at the time." And I said, "Well, that's nice. I appreciate, but I have kids at home and some of them are adopted. I want to talk to them first because I don't know how they would handle their mother being, a child welfare worker." So
Yeah.
we talked about it and I became an intake worker. So then they affectionately called me the baby snatcher. So, they got along with it. It worked out.
Okay, Lynn. So then, how did you know that you were ready to adopt? And I would even say, like, each time, because it's like every time you say yes, it's almost like a different time in your life to decide. So, how did you know that maybe our listeners can glean, like, okay, that helps me understand how I can know?
With the first two, we had been ready for quite a while. We'd actually been matched with little guys who were 3 and 5, and our daughter was 4. And I told the worker, I said, "You must think I'm really insane, but you want me to have 3, 4, and 5-year-olds in my house? No." Um, that would have been overwhelming, and they were boys. So I just kind of knew when we were approached with the 11 and the 12-year-olds. It just felt right. We gathered as much information as we could. We did some pre-placement visits. It went well. Um, the 17-month-old, I was at work one day and my husband called me at work and said, "Hey, I just found out about a 17-month-old boy. Can I call?" And I said, "Well, you already called." And he said, "Yeah, I did. And we're picking him up. We're picking him up tomorrow." And I went, "Okay." So we had no time to prepare for him.
Wow.
7.5 year old. I think we knew we were ready. Just because it seemed to be like about every 2.5 years, we added a placement, an adoptive child to our home. And then the baby, when I got the call, I didn't even call my husband at work to say we were taking a 30-day placement. I just figured, it's 30 days, what the heck? And 30 became 60 and then it became life. So it worked out.
Okay, so the key there is your license, you kept it active. So you were like renewing it, or your words earlier, recert or recertify. So you had it
Yes.
open and so you could keep accepting calls. Now, I will say from my family story, once we had our two kids and we signed the adoption papers, we did not maintain our license. We were asked to keep it open and we were like, no, we are
Mhm.
going to. I didn't have the ambition of going to 8, although my husband and I think differed on our original count. I wanted to go big. He wanted to go small. He said 1 was good and I said 2. So at least I got double. I got double what he was
There you
thinking,
go.
which works out well. So as we kind of close up here, I'm wondering if there's a listener that's feeling like, okay, adoption's not really for me, but I can think of someone I know. I know they've always talked about wanting to adopt. What would you recommend the listener do after hearing
Encourage
this
them
episode? Like, mm-hmm.
encourage them to contact either a local private or public agency. Again, I like to tell folks to call both and talk about the process because it can be a little bit different between a public and a private. I mean, as far as the home study itself, the criteria is the same, but what services the public agency is going to provide differ. For example, we hold custody of the child. We do place with contracted agencies, private agencies, for treatment foster homes, for residential group home needs, et cetera. We're required, like in a a treatment foster home setting, to go see those children twice a month and do phone calls on the opposite weeks. The private agency is required to go see those kids every week. So it's an extra layer of support, if you will. But ask lots of questions. Start writing questions down when you even think that this is a glimmer in your eye that you might want to foster and or adopt. Start jotting your questions down and then reach out to agencies. Reach out to parent support groups if you can find one in your area. I love the North American Council on Adoptable Children up in Minnesota.
Who was on my last podcast episode and encourages people, because one of the things I know people are thinking is, but I don't even know where to go. Like, who do I contact? So you contact the North American Council on Adoptable Children and they help you find a local agency. I would also do a little promo for, I have the Forgotten Adoption Option Facebook community. You're welcome to join and ask there. And coming this November is the Forgotten Adoption Option app that hopefully helps this happen a lot faster, because it's sometimes difficult to figure out where to get started.
True. It's doable. It really is. And don't be intimidated or afraid by paperwork. We do 1 week before our pre-service classes start, we do what's called Delaware Night, and we invite anyone who's interested in the process to come and listen. You'll meet myself, either one or two of my assessors. We're going to answer any questions you have. And if something, comes to mind after that evening, then call or email us and we'll be happy to assist. And it may be that you're just doing preliminary investigating, if you will, to find out if this is really something you want to do. And that's okay. I mean, at some point in time, the light bulb may go off and you may say, I'm ready. I want to move forward. The problem is there are so many children in this country that are waiting for permanence, and it happens every day. For 3 consecutive years, we had 4 adoptions of children who were in permanent custody. We are considered a large county. We're not a metro, but we're right next to Franklin County with Columbus. This past year, we finalized 8 adoptions, which was phenomenal.
Woohoo!
So we helped facilitate making families, and that's the best feeling in the world. And foster families, I have to give praise to a lot of our foster families. Some folks are afraid of engaging with birth parents. You gather so much history about your child through talking with birth mom, birth dad, bringing them to visits, meeting at McDonald's for a meal or whatever. They are a lifeline and they are a connection to these kids. And as long as there's no safety factor, we have a lot of of foster families who do reach out, maintain contact with emails, sending pictures, whatever, inviting to birthday parties. And Ohio does not recognize open adoption, but we have many families who have adopted who do maintain those connections after the finalizations.
So informative. Lynn, this has been great. I hope our listeners, I know we gave you a lot of words and acronyms and it feels like a process. My goal always is if you know that it's like 56 steps, at least if we tell you, you're not surprised. And so I
Right.
don't know if it's really 56 steps, but it can feel like a lot to process. And we hope that this episode helped you get ideas for yourself, or maybe you should pass this along to someone you know that has been talking about adoption. So, Lynn, thank you for taking time to let us better understand how we can know we're ready to adopt and how to get started. This was awesome.
Well, I appreciate you and everything you do, Marcy. Thank you very much for spreading the word.
You are so welcome. As a listener of the Forgotten Adoption Option podcast, you are helping raise awareness about foster care adoption and the 120,000 adoptable children in the United States. By leaving a review, subscribing, sharing, and talking about this podcast, you can help a child find their forever family. If you'd like more information on adopting a child or sibling group through the foster care system, please visit my website, ForgottenAdoptionOption.com. There you will find how to get started, and you can even order a copy of my book, The Forgotten Adoption Option, which will guide you through the entire process. You can pick from paperback, audio, and ebook formats, and you might be able to find my book at your local library. I welcome you to reach out with questions, comments, and your own adoption story. I would love to hear if you're signing up for training and where you are in the foster care adoption process. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just search for Marcy Bursack. I really appreciate you tuning in, caring, and sharing, because every child deserves a family.